Welcome back. We have tweets coming in. Festus Akimboewa says, truth is, development commissions have brought sustainable development to the northeast. Haven't brought sustainable development to the northeast and Niger Delta. They have abandoned projects all over the place. I had to write to the VP recently about the condition of the NDDC abandoned project in Ondo. That's from Festus Akimboewa. eBay says, the commissions have succeeded in confusing the functions of the ministries, councils, and parastatals by not properly aligning with the mandates of the MDAs in the name of reporting to the president. Feeling superior has cost us more than gains, more pains than gains. But we have a former commissioner in Desopadek, that's the Delta State Oil Producing Areas Development Commission, Mr. Ken Okolugbo, joining us from our Abuja studio. Thank you for joining us, Mr. Okolugbo. Okay, as I say, he will be with us in a few minutes. So let's come back to you. That tweet by eBay says the commissions, and that was like the question I said we'll look into before we went on that break. Said they've confused the functions or the functionality of the ministries and council areas and
local government.
So is that what the situation?
I think ideally they are all supposed to work together. In the course of implementation, there has been some challenges. Let me give you a situation. State allocation, as much as we would like to believe that local governments should manage theirs, local governments get their allocations from the state. So it's kind of a handout.
But that's not strictly correct, is it?
It's not.
It's supposed to go from the treasury straight to the local government account. Now, that doesn't happen most of the time.
Hold on there. Let me throw that question to Ken, who is ready now. Mr. Okolugbo, thank you for joining us.
I can hear you very well.
Okay. So the question I asked earlier, which was based on a tweet that eBay sent in, he says all these development commissions have sort of like succeeded in confusing the functions of the ministries, the council areas, and parastatals. You were a commissioner in Desopadek. Do you agree with that submission?
No, I exactly don't agree with that because the truth about it is, it depends. When I was a commissioner in Desopadek, one of the things we did was that we had to share our budget. Whenever we had our budgets, we had an idea of what the Niger Delta Development Commission was doing in our area. And we also had an idea of what the ministry was doing, though we are a parastatal of the Delta State government, so to say. But you remember that 13% of the derivation funds are usually shared 50-50%. 50% for the government and 50% for the commission. And so what we were doing was that we were very conscious of the fact that these development projects that were going to impact on the people should not be in the sense, if, for example, you're constructing a road and NDDC has an intention to have that road, you certainly would push it to another sector. But the guy that sent the Twitter is not far from the truth. There are some times that we have had clashes, quite all right. But that is when you don't do your due diligence. Because if you do your due diligence, what commissions are supposed to be is to bring government closer to the people. Because, for example, in the oil producing areas, the whole idea of setting up the commissions was to make sure the governor cannot sit down and know that every sector has not been touched. But the commissions can tell when you use from the bottom to top approach that there's so many sectors that have not been touched in terms of roads, in terms of schools, in terms of agriculture, in terms of empowerment programs. So that's exactly what it's supposed to be. So when you actually combine in terms of having a synergy, you don't duplicate projects.
But should development be through the commissions? What happens to the functions of the local government, functions of the state government in meeting the needs of the people? Do we have to go through the commissions? Right now, the Southeast most likely will get their commission signed into law. The Senate has passed that bill. There's a Northeast Development Commission. There's the NDDC. There's likely the possibility that the Southwest might come up with their own commission as well. So every region setting up a commission, should development go through that avenue?
Well, the thing about it is, for the Southeast, you take an example. Between 1967 and 1970, they were devastated by the Civil War. And there are only 2 states out of the 5 states of the Southeast, that is Imo and Abia, that are oil producing, which gives them an advantage because they are captured in the budget of the NDDC. Now, what happens to Anambra, Enugu, and Ebonyi, which are not oil producing? Whether you like it or not, the Southeast has suffered from a deficit in infrastructural development. So I think that the 2 senators, that is Anyao and Odua, who actually captured the bill on the Southeast Development Commission, gave it a timeline. They gave it a timeline of 10 years. And 10 years is enough for you to make to bridge the gap that they have lost in terms of the Civil War. You saw the advert you just ran before this program started on the need of the second Niger bridge running from my state, Asaba, to Onitsha because of the development that has, apart from urban migration, it's a bridge that has been the only bridge that connects the north, the central, and the southwest to the southeast. And that is a typical example of why there is a need for a commission. Yes, I agree with you that the local governments are there, but the local government funds are very minimal. We see that local governments are not able to even tie a road of 1 kilometer to 2 kilometers. And then the state governments are crying of the fact that, oh, we're paying salaries. They cannot even pay a minimum wage of 30,000 naira. And so when you have those commissions, what does it do? It brings more money because the federal government is now forced to actually map out extra funds to these commissions, which actually will now bring a whole, I mean, it's encapsulated in carrying out a whole developmental project around these areas. And so areas which hitherto suffered degradation and neglect will then be touched if it is actually approached from a sincere perspective.
Okay, but before you came, Femi was talking about the fact that the citizens are not holding those in authority responsible. In other words, bringing in the commission will now redirect or keep the focus of the citizens on the role of the federal government in establishing their areas, not looking at the roles that the local government and the state government are supposed to play in developing their areas.
Well, I won't say they're not holding the government to their responsibilities. There were checks and balances. For example, as a commissioner, I built a glass house. And that glass house, it spanned about 500 square meters. And I remember when I told my governor then that he should come commission the project. He was shocked that with the budget I had, I was able to influence, attract that kind of a project. Why do I say this? It depends on what you want. I remember I executed about 90 projects. And maybe probably if the commission wasn't there, I wouldn't have been able to execute that much project. But to me, I'm just using myself as a case study. I had a mandate. The mandate I had was a 3-year appointment as a commissioner. And I had a mandate that, look, the budget I had was quite small. I had about 4% out of 100% because of the quantum of production from the Ndokwa Nation. And so what I did was that I married it with what the state government was doing. And so for all the areas that the state government didn't touch, I quickly ran into those areas. Of course, I was very desperate and I was eager to do more, or maybe I was biting more than I could chew. But that was an individual decision. I left the commission. I still did owe some contractors who were working in my area. But the projects had been done. So the people are seeing this project, and then they will ask themselves that, look, sometimes they will say, oh, Desopadec is even working better than the Delta State government. But the truth of it is that Desopadec is part of the Delta State government. It depends on who you have driving the commission. And so it is very important that when you're looking at the checks and balances, you look at the people who are driving this process and the government, as it were, who is supposed to be your supervising, apart from your supervising directorate, but a supervising agency